Welcome to this episode of the ASQ Podcast, where we focus on life, leadership, and culture. In today's episode, we discuss Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey and explore how mythological themes can inform and inspire modern leadership practices. Stay tuned. My job. Yeah. You saw my stank eye?
No, I did.
Welcome to another episode of A Soul's Quest.
The ASQ
The
podcast.
ASQ Podcast. Yes, I love it.
Yes,
I love our rebranding. I love
You
it.
do. It's pretty fun, actually. Just kind of like evolving, right? You kind of start something, and then you learn something, and then you adjust, and then you move from there. I mean, that's life, constant change, constant improvement. So
Totally. I love it. Yeah. And I love what we're talking about today.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you, what are we discussing today? Not that I don't already know, but,
Today we're talking
for
about
showmanship purposes.
So I love that we're using our computers now. I think this is so awesome.
Look at you. Yeah.
So today we're talking about leadership through the lens of the hero's journey.
Awesome. I love that.
I really feel like you're the subject matter expert of the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, because you've studied him for many, as long as we've been together, right? And even longer. But I want to start with a quote to kind of get us into this episode. So the quote is by somebody unknown, and it says, "Every leader's journey begins with a call to adventure, a moment of realization that the path ahead is theirs to forge and transform."
That's awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was deep.
Yeah, that's a very good quote. I mean, it kind of like...
It's almost poetic.
Well, it is. I mean, a lot of mythology, which is metaphorically nature, right, has a lot of poetry involved in it. So when you hear something like this, it's like, and plus, the hero's journey, the monomyth, it's really, it's primarily used in storytelling, and that's the way that we understand our world, through storytelling, through just the whole part of being able to use art and poetry to make a point, so it does sound like that, because I think that is what it meant to be.
Well, it's just a powerful quote. It just is like, oh, wow. I don't know. I like it. All right. So like I said, you're sort of the subject matter expert about the hero's journey. I know that you're what?
No,
why are you hesitant?
Sometimes I say like subject matter expert is like you could get the same information from a library card.
But some people may not do what you've done to understand the hero's journey and know Joseph Campbell. I mean, you've studied him and introduced me to him, and it's a very powerful tool or resource in your life.
Of course.
So give us an overview of what it is, and then when we get into the episode further, I kind of want to break it down and provide some practical, bring it down to real life.
I mean, like, just to put it in simple terms, right? This is the journey that every individual, right, who's self-aware and who is in the journey of knowing who they are and their relationship to the whole, kind of like goes through. And the idea behind this journey is to be able to, number one, go in this adventure in which you're embarking on an adventure to evaluate. The status quo doesn't really fit with you. It doesn't really make sense, right? So you're looking to find something, right, in the ordinary world, right, in the things that you see that are not really, this is just doesn't feel right in my soul, right? So you're looking for something more. So that's kind of like the departure stages, right? And then in that stage, you go through, man, I don't know if I really should do this, my soul this, but I want to make sure that I'm secure, and we're going to talk about this more, because this is kind of like the essence of leadership and why you see the potential of people to be good leaders, but what happens when they suddenly start thinking about themselves, right? And their security, and how damaging that could be for the whole, Okay. So we're gonna talk about that. So there is a process in which you go through. The hero's journey really has like 3 parts, which are within 12 stages, right? And the idea is to come back, to go through this journey of rediscovering a new way of being, to either for an idea, for a group of people, or a concept, right? And then be able to bring that back, into the world, to bring
integrating
it into the world. Now, what happens a lot of the time, and this is one of the things that people that have read the book, kind of like understand, that there is also the potential for the hero for lack of a better term, to become the villain, because that replenishment of life, that cycle of life, that cycle of the heroic journey needs to happen on a constant basis, right? Because that's what evolution is like. So the idea of the hero's journey is to really go to a transformation so that you could come at the end and become a better individual for the purpose of saving a people, saving a life, improving something, right? That's kind of like, that's the idea of the journey. So the transformation, the inner transformation, the psychological, spiritual, emotional transformation that everybody needs to go, that people that choose to go through, because not everybody answers the call.
That's interesting. Okay. So let's start with, I know that the start of the adventure is the call to adventure, right? So what is that? What does that mean? What does that look like? How is that relatable to the individual?
And in particularly when it comes to leadership, right? Because this is what we're talking about today, right? There comes a point in our professional experiences, our communal experience, right? Even in our personal life, so in our life or in our communal experiences, in which we get this urge and this feeling that things could be done differently, right? That something doesn't feel right. That as a person, like, this is something that could be better, and you see the examples throughout life, right? And
what are some of those? Like what?
I'll give you, I think of one of the examples that I think about, right, is the one that really just pops into my head right now is, I forget if it was in the 20s or in the 30s, there was the fire in New York that it was a textile company. I don't remember exactly the name of it, but there was a catastrophe that happened in which a lot of people lost their lives because of the working conditions that were in this building. Okay. Right. Yeah. And young people were working in unsafe conditions. So it was like child labor, women in very, very tough situations, and a lot of people lost their lives, right? So that situation catalyzed people to be able to make a change when it comes to labor laws and expectations of how to change, the security of the employees in that building and the processes by which we are able in the places that we're able to work. So from that standpoint, that's a point of view. It took a catastrophe, right, to be able to change that aspect of the culture, right? And it could have gone as business as usual. Okay, some people die because it happened before. So many, this is always the battle between capital and labor, right? So that's like one of those examples in which it constantly happens, right? So you see the evolution and the working conditions of individuals. We have child labor laws. We have safety protocols. We have all these things to safeguard the safety of employees, right? Because you could go on one side and be just primarily focused on profit, and then you let all these things happen, and somebody has to comes up to the point in which they say, no, this is not enough, and this can't happen, right, anymore.
So that's the call to the adventure is recognizing that there is a need to change something. Yes. Whether it's in your personal life or within an organization or a business or in that realm with other people.
And typically that call to the adventure, it happens in two ways, right? It happens in which you get that internal urge to say something like transform your life or transform something or create something. Entrepreneurs get this feeling. It is the essence of them to solve a problem. That's what entrepreneurship is. Any business is about knowing a problem and solving it and taking the initiative to be able to do that. So those are the things that kind of like come from from experience, right? Then there's also being pushed
forced
into it, right? Which a lot of us, this is what happens. We are forced into situations that we have to react, right? Think, for instance, all the changes that has happened. For instance, we live in Florida, right? Since Hurricane Andrew took place, right? It devastated South Florida. Yeah. So then from that point of view, because we had to be able to adjust, we have better building codes. We have better ways of management and alerting when something catastrophic could actually happen when it comes to hurricanes. So those things force us to come out of our regular world.
Out of our comfort zone.
Out of our comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
To be able to create something different and adjust. And that happens in the micro level within individuals, right? But it also happens in the collective, in the organizations. You know, most organizations are reactive when it comes to things, and that's not a good way to do business. But it's one of the 4 modes that people have.
Well, how beautiful is it, though, when something like that happens in an organization, an individual, say, for example, a middle manager or a team leader or even the CEO or president, recognize something's not right. Something's not right, and it needs to be addressed, or the call to adventure, you're forced, right? And you're able to incorporate or include everybody into the process of creating something beautiful.
But this is what happens.
And changing this practice, right?
Correct. So for instance, most of my work has been in middle management, right? But this is what happened. This is the issue. Most middle management, middle leaders, right? In the ones in the middle, they know these things, they experience these things, right? And this is kind of like the epitome of what the heroic journey in leadership really takes place, and it's within those middle managements, right? Because if you think about it, right, they're in the middle. They have to cater to the employees, but they also have to implement the vision of the upper management, right? So they're in a situation in which they are forced to implement something that comes from outside of them. And then sometimes they begin to realize, this is just not thing. This is not well. This is just not this is not happening. And then you see both sides and both needs, but then you're caught up in the middle, right? So you are thrust into this adventure of trying to figure out what is the best way to go about it. And that brings frustration, right? Number one, that brings, I don't want to do this stuff. Because this is what happens. I'm just going to do my job. I'm just going to do my job so that I could get paid, and I just keep on moving, right? And you see all the things that could be done, but you could just sit back and say refusal is like, that's not my job. I just got to get paid. I just got to do my job. I'm just going to be quiet, take my money, and just go home.
So there is that element of the hero's journey where there is the refusal to the call. Right?
Exactly.
So that's what you're saying is when you're like, I need to make a paycheck. I'm not trying to cause any frustration, So,
and the reason why is because it is tough. I mean, this is not an easy thing to go into this heroic journey as particularly for middle management. It's not an easy thing, or even not so much, even middle management, but also in different places that you find yourself somewhat in the middle, right? It's challenging to go against the status quo, right? To go against that thing that has been there, but it probably no longer serves us. And the reason being is because you're going to have enemies, right? You're going to have adversaries that come to that because the status quo, it's important to them. It gives them the power that they need. And you are messing that up.
Yeah.
Because, and that's really what this is really like the struggle of people that are caught up in the middle. Personally, I have personal experience when it comes to that because I'm very outspoken. I'm very, I look at things differently. Not better, but just differently. So that's always been a point of contention when I'm in the middle and I see, well, we're just going to do this. But then wait a minute, what about the people at the bottom? It's like, what about them? What about these things?
And that's the call to the adventure, though, because what happens then is that if you're stuck in the middle and you choose not to answer the call, okay, so then you're not going through the process of the hero's journey. You're just sticking with the status quo.
Yeah.
All right. But for those individuals who heed that call, that is almost at that point, that example that you just used, making the decision then to say, this isn't going to work for me. And that is answering the call, right, to the adventure, because at that point you might have to leave that organization or move on from a relationship or whatever the case is. You know what I mean?
So this is part of the initiation process, right? Because now that you might have pissed some people off, right? And we're talking about the people that take on the call, right?
Yeah.
Not the ones that say, I'm just going to just quiet. I'm just going to just mind my business, make my money.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to focus on, because
right?
those are the people we're talking to. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So the real initiation and the ordeal happens when you make a choice to go through this journey of transforming for the betterment of the whole, right? Because now you're going to have enemies. You're going to have adversaries.
Right.
You may have some allies, and typically you do have some allies that see things your way.
Yeah.
But it becomes problematic and it becomes a tough situation, right? So as a consequence of that, you either get destroyed emotionally and you can't take it anymore, and you completely get overcome.
Yeah.
By the adversity and trying to transform this system, and then you could just be taken out, you could get fired, or you could just it could manifest itself in an emotional breakdown, right? So that's the possibility of what happens if you decide to take on the heroic journey. But that's the thing. That's what makes it a hero. That's what makes it so unique to be a leader rather than a manager.
Yeah.
Right? Because a manager is just managing the situation. It's like, hey, this is what they want me to do. I'm just going to do it. A manager, a leader says there's better ways to do it.
Right. So the manager is the one that says, I need to make a paycheck.
That's it.
No offense to any of the managers.
No, not
out
at
there,
all.
But
Don't take
this
it.
is, but the leader is the one that says a change has to be made.
Exactly.
So then talk to us about, or explain sort of the rest of the hero's journey, because it's really interesting, and it's very, I think it's a useful resource.
It is.
So I really want to hear about the rest.
So
of that.
once you come to the point in which you confront the situation, right? Either you'll be able to overcome the situation, right? And make the changes that you see and galvanize people to be able to make the changes that you see, or you get consumed by it, right? So in a practical sense, right, you get a reward in either way, right? Because a lot of the times when we think of rewards, we only think of positive things, right? We don't think of a failure or a losing or dissolution of things being as a reward, right? But everything has a lesson. Everything has a benefit when we look at it from that standpoint, right? So let's take on one hand, if everything changes, right, for the better, right? So you have a couple of possibilities, right? That means that it's like you accomplished what you wanted, right? And the situation got better, right? And then this is where the fork in the road comes in, right? Because one, you say, yeah, what a good boy am I, right? And then you begin to taught your own ego and thinking highly of yourself, right?
Is that the dark side of it that you were talking
That's
about?
the dark side of it all, right? And then from that point, because again, everything is cyclical, right? So you may get to a point in which things are good, but then if you don't evolve and if you don't allow yourself to evolve, and you're not able to see those changes that are happening from the people that are coming behind you, right? Then now you become the one that maintains the status quo.
Right.
And the reason why is because power is important. When you achieve your certain vision, and you have that power and you have that ego boost, right? It's hard to walk away from that.
Yeah, it is.
It's very challenging to walk away from that. Because that means that you have to be humble. And then if you allow yourself to think for it, this was my purpose. But now somebody's want to take my purpose away. So you see this.
So it's almost like that's like taking over your identity.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you see it in organizations, right?
Oh, yeah.
I've
happens
known
all the time.
I've known of people that have in their heroic sense evolved and become part of an organization that lead other people, but have used that transformation to maintain their own status quo and consequently begin to discriminate against others, put other people down,
Yeah.
You know, I've seen it in situations. This one particular person that I could think about, you know, the way that she particularly talked to people and the way in which she went about diminishing people, making people cry, you know, not giving the leg up that other people had, right? But really making really excellent money, you know, a lot of money, and maintaining that that status quo that, you know, so far like kind of like we afford to change, so to speak. So you are able to see that, and then so that's one aspect, and that's when the fork in the road comes in. If you are able to be successful, right? If you are not able to change the culture or change everything else, then that becomes a problem, because now you're lost, right? You could potentially become lost,
right?
But the beauty about that is about the return, right? Because even though in a situation, in a culture that you take the leadership role, but you're not able to make the change, there are lessons in that.
Right.
There are important lessons. You know, is it, how can I communicate better? How can I communicate differently? You know, how can I improve that stuff that to get better?
To be better.
Or maybe this is the universe telling you need to do your own thing. You need to find an environment in which you're allowed to do your own thing.
Right.
Because they're out there, or you could start your own thing, right? And then you could come back and change that, right? The beautiful thing about a hero, right? That's the hero that progresses, right? Is the hero that is able to walk away at a certain point, right? That they're walking away after getting to a certain point. They'll walk away, you know, because there's a point in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, right, in which the hero just wants to live his own life, and he needs to go away.
Now, are you saying because the situation is irreparable, or are you saying you just make a decision to just walk away? Yeah,
because once you accomplish what you set out to do, if you stay there long enough, then you are going to maintain your status quo because of power.
Right.
And this is the interesting thing, right? This is the interesting thing about being a leader, because a leader, like we talked in the last episode, it's really about helping others grow, right? And facilitating other people to get to a different place.
Yeah.
Right? That's the beauty about leadership, right?
Yeah.
But again, when you get to a certain point in which you now are becoming, and this is the hard part about leaders to understand, that it's like sometimes you have to either walk away or take a step back
to let other people grow into those or that leadership role. Yeah. And I think that is hard for people to do because of an ego, you know.
And it's power. It's this is not an easy conversation for people to have, because power is involved, and power it's a real thing to be able to understand the psychology of us as human beings in our relationship to others, right? Yeah. Because you know, Leadership and the 1 Minute Manager, you know, Ken Blanchard wrote that book. One of the things that he says is as a leader, as a manager, you get to a point in which you shouldn't be doing much.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like you really shouldn't be doing much. You should have time and flexibility to do other endeavors or anything, because you are empowering people, you know, within the structure of the organization to be creative, to adapt, to make changes that are necessary for the well-being of the organization, right? It's that idea of self-reliance.
And it's also when you're able to, you just made me think of this, that when you're in a leadership position and you've developed your people so much that now they feel empowered, right? They feel empowered to do the things that they need to do. They have autonomy, all the things that are really beautiful about leadership, right? And they have been able to be creative, and they've basically they're running the show. And for the leader, that person that is in power, to be able to step away and say, I know that I can't take it any further. I've given the tools and the resources to these people, these individuals, and now they're going to take it to the next level.
Yes.
I mean, we know somebody that just did that. You know, and it's like, it's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
She knew she couldn't take it to a different level, and she gave it to somebody else to take over. And that's that speaks volumes.
It does. It talks about,
volumes.
I mean, again, it's like leadership is common knowledge, but it's not common practice, right?
Yeah.
It's just not, right? And then this person that you're talking about, Mindy, right? Just her understanding is like, it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
Right. And I need to move this along.
Yeah.
You know, it shows volumes about what it really means to be a leader. It was not about the status. It wasn't about the title. It wasn't about the recognition. It's about my job that I started. I could only take it this far.
So far, yeah. And that when I remember when we were there, you know, celebrating her, I just felt like, wow, that's like amazing. Like she's an amazing woman. That's crazy.
And this is the example of what is so interesting. You know, the Bible is kind of like paradoxical, right? But there's this the example of Moses, right? If you look at it from the leadership sense, right? And I know that he says that God said, you know, you can no longer, you can't go into the land of Canaan, you know, so he died outside of the promised land, so to speak, right? But the idea, right, that Moses only could take his people up to a certain point.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that needed to give way to somebody else. You know, there's a lesson in that.
Yeah. Huge.
There's a lesson in which, you know, you have to be able to let go. You have already set the standards. You already set the commandments. You set the structure, or, you know, by organizing a group of a random group of people, but organize them, get them. But after a certain point, you know, either by the universe, by God, right? He needs to give way to something else, you know? And that sometimes could be done willingly, right? And a lot of the times, right? Or most of the times, it's not done like that.
No.
Right? Because leaders get caught up in their ego. They start really focusing on the optics of it all. Look how, and I know of a particular person in our area which look at the great job that I have done. You know, but at what cost?
Now, is this the part of the hero's journey that is the reward, or the integrating back into? Is that similar?
Well, it's similar to that, right?
Because what you're doing is you've developed people, you brought them to a certain level, you've done everything that you can, you've maximized everybody to the level that I no longer can go any further.
Yes.
So is that a reward? That's similar.
That's like the return with the elixir, right? Because once you get to a point, right, in which you've done everything that you can, you share the knowledge, you share the expertise.
Okay.
Right. You were able to transform the culture. You were able to show people this is how it goes. Right. This is how our culture should look. Okay. Right. Yeah. And this is kind of like the evolution of it. Right.
Right.
There's a point in which, you need to step back.
Right.
Because if you don't do that, right, and if you're not self-aware enough, right, to understand that there's a very thin line between once you get to a place, right, that then you could become that status quo that no longer evolves the situation or the company or the culture or anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything is about evolution.
Right.
Right?
And so if you maintain that status quo, that ego, that power, and because you're afraid to let it go, then essentially you're debilitating the growth of your people, your own growth, which is most important, because that's a growth. That's a recognition that, okay, I've done all I can. It's time for me. That's why I think that's such a beautiful thing that Mindy did, because she realized, okay, I brought it to here.
Yep. I'm
good. I've brought a lot. I have a great team. I'm good.
Yes.
And I'm going to let this, be taken to the next level.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say, but basically it's humbling to say, to be able to give that away, but it's beautiful at the same time. That's the elixir that you're talking about, is giving that to other people so that they can take this place to a different level.
Yes.
And make something even better out of it.
Yeah.
And that's where the ego, that's the problem. Because some people don't think, I can't get any better than this.
And you could see this playing in ideologies too, right? Because when you have the liberals and conservative ideologies, right? And the conflict that are constant between those two ideologies, right? And their own willingness, right, to evolve, you know, based on a mutual give and take, right? So you see that
right
playing out like that, and then the leaders of those ideologies perpetuate those status quo, which hinder the more cohesive way of looking at our society, so to speak, right? In transforming and evolving, you know, what we are, what we're supposed to do. So like the more that, and you see it, it's like the holding tight of this idea of this is it, this is how things should be,
right?
You know, it happens over and over and over again. Because of a true leader is a person that is able to say, or an organization filled with leaders is the one that is able to say, you know, we've done this, we see that it works, but we also have to evolve, not change, right? Because if you start with a concept and an idea and a basic idea of something, of doing something, you know, like your mission statement, right? Which is a powerful thing. Right? That mission statement doesn't have to change, but how you achieve that mission statement, that's the part that evolves.
Right.
You know, and sometimes it's going to go this way, then sometimes it's going to go that way, and then sometimes you're going to go forward, sometimes you're going to go backwards, right? But that's just part of the process, and the leader needs to understand how far or where they could take all these different things, you know. But this thing with the hero's journey, really, in essence, number one, it's a personal thing. You know, it's a very individual thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You know, it's a very personal journey to be a leader. Because in order for a leader to be successful, right, from my opinion, and from experiencing it, we can, you know, from experiencing it with people like Mike, and other people that have had the blessings of being around, right? It's a very personal thing. And it's a very isolating thing.
Right.
As well. That's why most people don't want to do it. Because in the solitude of it all, when you doubt, when you go down in the pit, you know, you go into that cave, you know, the valley of darkness, you know, the belly of the whale.
It makes me think of The Alchemist. Because that's the hero's journey.
It is.
Right?
It is precisely.
It's a great book. If you haven't read it, you got to pick it up.
Yeah,
you got to read it.
Yeah, the Alchemist depicts a hero's journey to the T.
He went into the depths of the pit, you know, and it was just a really good story. But I don't want to take away from what you're saying.
And the idea is so when you do that as a leader, right? The outcome should be, well, no, let me rephrase that. When you go into that pit, it's an individual, right, and as a collective group, there's two types of outcomes that come out, right? The first one is empathy, right? Because it's like, holy crap, if I go through this and I know how it feels, like the Jesus 40 days, 40 nights, and his hero's arc is a perfect example of that, because he understood the struggles and the things. And I'm not being religious. I'm just using Jesus as a metaphor for this concept, right?
Yeah.
When he went into the 40 days, 40 nights, and he understood the temptations, right? Yeah. Of lust, of power, right? Of the world, right? Which are real temptations. It's metaphorically speaking. This is what we face all the time, particularly people that are leaders. Yeah. You know, the power, the intoxication when it comes to power, the intoxication of being admired and looked at, right? And being, I'm the one, and people know that I'm the one, and they come to me. That's intoxicating, right? Money, power, it's intoxicating.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing, right? And being able to go into that pit and then grow empathy, because you are rejecting that, right? That's one of the outcomes that could go from that experience. The other outcome is the hell with it. Nihilism. I'm just gonna get nihilism and hedonism is like, I don't care about anybody else.
I'm just gonna take
this world. This world is shitty. This world is whatever. I'm just gonna get mine. I don't care if I make anybody cry. My job is to make money.
Yeah.
To make
There's a lot of people like that.
And
out
to
there.
strive for power. And
a lot
and
of leaders out there like that.
And to strive for self-aggrandizement.
Yeah.
Right? At the expense and the authorities like they don't really care.
No.
So it's like I was watching this thing with Jordan Peterson the other day, and he's talking about how many narcissists, right, are in positions of power, in politics and in music and art, and you see in all this different stuff, and the reality is it's like they're like the upper management, right, and everybody else is like the middle management that see the difference, but because they're so powerful or the perception of power, right, everybody bows down.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that leaders restrict. It's like, no, right? And that's a hard thing because it's a personal thing, but it's also a collective thing.
Yeah, I would think that I think that's a struggle for a lot of people, a lot of leaders, especially when the money, because you're right. You used a good word. It's intoxicating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So being self-aware and being like, I was talking to somebody the other day and I remember saying to that person, like, it's really being able to, being a leader is really being able to acknowledge your own behaviors and your tendencies and the things that make you respond in certain situations. Yeah. And I mean, that's what my dissertation was about, right? So anyway, okay, because I know we could talk about this forever, but so how can we take the hero's journey and on a practical level implement it? I mean, I know we've kind of gone into that, but just give me a couple like strategies or pointers or something that we can take away from this episode on a practical level for a leader.
So personally speaking, one of my objectives, right, and has always been, is to empower people. And this is what we call ASQ empowerment services, is to empower people, right? And I was taught that at a very young age, that this idea of empowering others, right? From Ken Mullen, my mentor, my dad, so I learned that from him. This idea of empowering others, right? Of helping them become better, or helping people grow, right? And I remember reading The Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill, and he says this line. It's like, nobody could achieve success without having the milk of human kindness, right? And that, I mean, if you think about that, right? Because you could be heroic, right, and overcome a lot, right, which a lot of people have, but at what expense? Right? Who were all the people that you destroy along the way? Who were the cultures and the ideas and the people that you just destroy for a temporary moment of time? We were doing a thing about, we live on this earth for 75, 80 years on average, right? But for a little period of time, you destroyed all this to make yourself feel like the greatest thing ever.
Self-aggrandizement,
right? It's like the Indra story, right? Like the Indra story. There's thousands of Indras that went before you, right? Or you could do the opposite, which is the empowerment of people, of individuals, so that the collective could benefit, right? That's the challenge of our time. And you got to start from that premise, right? So to answer your question about what kind of lessons we could take and what we could practically take from this, right, is that, number one, I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. No. It's going to be challenging. It's very challenging because it affects your well-being. It affects your finances. If you decide to become a leader, it might affect your finances. It might affect your lifestyle. It might affect all this.
You might lose some friends.
You might lose some friends. Lose some, you might lose status.
You might lose status. Ooh.
You might lose status. So all those things are things to keep into consideration. But to live authentically, right? To live authentically as you were meant to be requires this journey. It requires it to live authentically. And look around you. Just look around your world. Look around it. It's like, what can you do in your circle of influence within your family, within your community, within your work, right? Little actions that could just change the status quo for the purpose of bettering the environment.
Yeah.
And the people around you.
I like that. I think that's a really good question. I think that in the face of that question, if you're asking that question to yourself, right, is then asking, how can I be an authentic individual?
Yeah.
Through this process, like how can I maintain authenticity?
Yeah.
And that's the problem I think that people have, is that they go through these processes and they lose that little component.
Yeah. Most people have the potential to be really good. And I think that most people try to be good, right? But again, that fork in the road happens in which I overcome everything. I mean, like I hear this all the time. Well, I did this. Why can't they do it?
Yeah.
Without having that empathy to understand that there's a lot of luck at play in the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chance at play within the world. You know, there's a lot of happenstance at play in the world. You know, so just being a little bit more gracious, you know, or how fortunate we might be to be put in situations of leadership. True. And how do we use that leadership, you know, not as a talking point, because I've seen it done as a talking point, but how do you do it, right, for the betterment of other people? That's the challenge. That's really what it means to be a hero. That really is. Yeah. That's the difference between a hero and a villain, and it's just a thin line, not a title.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a lot of thoughtful stuff to think about. Oh.
Yeah. And again, it's like a lot of things that the heroic journey is a physical thing, right? It is part physical. Right. Right? It is part physical. It is part mental. Yeah. But more than anything else, it involves your soul. And your soul means your mentality, but also your heart. And, you know, it's that Greek idea of a total individual. It requires that.
Yeah. So I think basically the bottom line and the takeaway from this episode is that individuals, leadership individuals, and individuals, just everybody, can look at leadership as an opportunity for growth, challenges, transformation, evolving, and that the hero's journey is a source for integrating into that process. So, okay.
Yeah. And I guess it's a process to follow to arrive at that conclusion.
Yeah. We'll have to provide some links and whatnot for our listeners.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, right? Typically, like I said, is used primarily for storytelling and things of that nature. But the reality of it is really storytelling and mythology is a metaphorical language to see how you could find your potential and consequently how you affect everything around you, positively or negatively.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. If you're ready for meaningful personal growth and transforming your business or organization, visit our website at asqempowermentservices.com for more information. Stay tuned for more exciting topics.